Hey guys, it's Tricky Nick here. Welcome to part 2 of the best and worst costumes for every Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Fighter. Today, we are finishing up the list with the second half of the roster. Before you watch this video though, consider checking out part 1 too. If you guys enjoy this video and you want to see more Nintendo content, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to talk more about this list with me, join my Discord server with the link in the description. Anyways, let's begin. Continuing with Diddy Kong, the reference to Donkey Kong math is really cool, but Diddy Kong's cyan costume doesn't look that great, so it's his worst costume. Diddy Kong's best costume is his pink, because it references Dixie Kong, a fighter that really deserves a spot in the game. Next up is Lucas, and his yellow and green costume makes his hair look worse for some reason, and the colors on the shirt itself don't look very good. So it's definitely the worst of Lucas's costumes. Lucas's best costume was a battle between the gray man shirt and the green dog shirt. Ultimately, the doggo won out because I love dogs. Sonic has some of the worst costumes of all time. I mean, all but one of his costumes are blue. The worst of them all though has to be the one where he's wearing white shoes, because the color of his fur is the grossest blue I've ever seen. His best costume was hard to choose, because they're all really bad. I picked his default as his best costume, as the others just make him look worse. King DDD, the very character that got me into Super Smash Bros. As much as it pains me to do this, I have to pick his worst costume. This was made easy by that gray costume, because while the reference to the Game Boy is cool, it looks really bland. DDD's best costume is actually his default, as the others just don't compare to his default costume. Then we have Olimar and Elf. The worst costume here is the red elf costume, so we don't need a reference to because we already have Olimar. The best costume is Olimar's tannish yellow costume, because Pikmin 3 is the best Pikmin. Much like Sonic, Lucario has a lot of blue costumes. This super light blue is his worst, and the navy blue is his best. I considered picking the green costume as Lucario's best, but I don't really like the purple tint his shirt has. Rob is the robot who saved North American gaming, so I feel bad for insulting his costume. But since I have to pick a worst, the yellow one looks a little off. I personally think a replacement that looks like Wall-E would be a great idea, but I digress. Rob's best outfit is the red, because the reference to the Virtual Boy is ironic, as Rob saved the North American gaming industry and the Virtual Boy almost killed it. Yet another Link fighter is up, Toon Link. His worst outfit is the brown costume. You can't even call it that, as it's almost identical to his green default outfit. As with the other Links, the best Toon Link costume is the Dark Link version. It's just a great costume for all the Link variants. Unlike Fox, Wolf's orange outfit is his worst rather than one of his best. As for his best, the black appearance from the unreleased Star Fox 2 is really cool, and it's a very obscure reference. Villager is a special case, as almost every costume is vastly different than the other. The worst one is this one. It's just really unsettling. Moving on, the best villager is the pink, because our eyes are just so cute. Mega Man has a lot of meh costumes, but his worst one is the green and yellow. It just doesn't mix well. His best in my opinion is his original, because you just can't top that classic Mega Man look. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has a lot of weird and wacky inclusions. Wii Fit Trainer is one of the prime examples of this. While the costumes don't change other than their colors, I really don't like the default male costume, as it's mostly gray. The only reason male yellow is my favorite is because one time I actually managed to win as Wii Fit Trainer against King K Rool, which was really crazy to me at the time. Everybody listen up, I better not catch anyone simping for yellow Rosalina. The yellow on yellow colors look pretty bad. As for her best costume, the fire costume from 3D World looks really nice, and I really like seeing her 3D World appearance. The holographic Little Mac is hard to look at, and it's kinda creepy. I really like Little Mac's blue costume though, and the red gloves are the typical boxing glove color, so it's easily my favorite. Greninja has two purple costumes, and the violet one is probably the worst, with the green tongue being very out of place. The best costume on Greninja is actually surprisingly his pink one in my opinion. I just think it has a really nice color scheme. Paul and Tina doesn't really need the black costume, as the reference to Dark Pit isn't necessary since he's already in the game. For the bad reference, it gets the worst spot. Her best costume is the purple, because it looks very nice, and the reference to Medusa is really cool. Pac-Man has a lot of bad costumes, as most barely change his appearance. His worst costume is his red one though, because it copies the default one, but adds sleeves to it to make it worse. The best is his oven mitt costume, because it's the only one that significantly changes his look without making him look worse. Robin actually has quite some different costumes, so these decisions were somewhat difficult. His worst is the white costume, because it doesn't look very good with his character. I was contemplating between the default male and the default female as the best, but I chose the male because the sword gives me Harry Potter vibes. Naked Shulk makes me uncomfy, so it gets the pick for his worst costume. Shulk's best is probably his yellow costume, because I really like the way his hair looks with the rest of his armor. Next up is Bowser Jr. and the 7 Koopalings. While Bowser Jr. is the default fighter, I just think he looks the least interesting of the Koopalings. Also, side note, if you guys want me to re-rank the Koopalings and include Bowser Jr., I could very well do that if anybody wants that. Anyways, back to what I was saying. As for my pick for the best, of course it's Morton, because he's my favorite Koopaling, and he's my logo. It's really hard to pick a worst doggo, as all of Duck Hunt's costumes are different dogs. I really like all of these, but if I had to pick a worst, the brown one looks kind of odd. His best was easily the one that looks like a Dalmatian, because it closest resembles the colors of my dog. Hi Willow! We're coming up on our very small Street Fighter portion of the roster, and first up is Ryu. Ryu's worst costume is the all-black one, because it just kind of blends together. His best is his orange, because it makes him look like a prisoner, which is even more intimidating than his muscles. Much like Ryu, Ken's gray outfit makes everything blend in, so I don't like it. Ironically, Ken's black outfit is actually the best in my opinion, as not only does the belt change the color to make the clothing look better, but his skin gets a bit darker, which I think looks really cool. I can't tell you which Cloud costume is which, so here's his best, and here's his worst. Those were definitely well thought out choices, nobody questioned them, we're moving on now. The black female Khorin costume changes the hair to be darker, which I think looks much worse than any other variant. Khorin's best costume is the default female, because the style and coloration looks so much better than the male version. Bayonetta's default appearance is actually the worst, because it's very similar to her original costume, which for some reason isn't her default costume, which should really get changed, but that's like a totally different story. Her best costume is easily the red, because not only does her hair turn white, but the reference to Jean is really cool as well. Inkling has a lot of unique costumes, so this was a pretty difficult choice. I think my least favorite of the Inklings was the purple, because it's too similar to other designs, minus the school uniform, which I really hate. The best Inkling is easily the green Inkling. I really like the skull mask, and it changes up the style of the Inkling the most, so it gets the best spot. Ridley is my main, so I use him quite a bit. Despite how many times I've used him though, I've only used the green costume once. I think it looks really gross. But the best was a very close contest between Mecha Ridley and the red costume. I chose the Mecha Ridley eventually, because he looks really menacing. Simon's default appearance is my favorite, as the red looks similar but better, so there's no real use of having the brown costume as his default. I really like Simon's indigo costume. Not for any big reason, I just like the color scheme. Richter, Richter, is the other Castlevania character, and his costumes aren't that different from one another, so I'm going by color preference on this one. His worst is his yellow because it looks pretty faded, and his best costume is the black just simply because I like the color scheme. Big Boy Rule's white costume is the worst looking, as he looks much worse than the other colors. Not only that, but the art is actually different than the in-game sprite, so it's actually inaccurate. King K Rool's best costume is the brown, as the color of the cape looks nice with the brown, and the reference to Clump is hilarious. I love that guy. Unlike Villager, Isabelle doesn't have very different costumes. Her worst is actually her default costume. I just don't like the bright green compared to her other green appearance. I really like Isabelle's red costume though, as it's very different, and the reference to the Happy Home Academy is fun. Up next is Incineroar, and his green costume really doesn't match with the fire belt thingy. His best costume was an easy choice though, because the purple reference is Big the Cat, my favorite Sonic racing character. And at long last, we are only down to the DLC fighters. First up is Piranha Plant. The yellow Piranha Plant doesn't mix well with the purplish pot, so it gets the worst spot here. For the best spot, I picked the black costume because it's a 3D Land reference, and I love 3D Land. As a side note, I don't get why there isn't a PD Piranha costume. Maybe he will be in the next Fighter's Pass. Joker has two costumes that are different from his default look, but they're both worse than his normal style. If I had to pick one to be worse than the other school costume, I think the white school costume is the worst. The best Joker costume is the white, as I really like the hair color and suit color change. Ah, Hero, the RNG spammer. So since he has so many original alternate costumes, his default actually looks the worst. His best was a tough choice between the two Erdrick costumes, but I decided that his original Erdrick was the better of the two. Banjo and Kazooie's worst costume is the green, because it makes him look like a zombie, which is pretty unsettling. I really like the black costume though, because the bird looks really beautiful compared to the other costumes. Blue was a close second, but it just couldn't compare. Up next is Terry, and his orange looks too close to his default costume, which makes sense because it's his old appearance, but it still gets the worst spot. The best costume on Terry is the green, as I like the tan pants combined with the green. Byleth has some alright costumes, but the green female costume is the worst, simply because of the hair color. I really like the red female costume though, just because I like the colors. We have finally reached the last fighter on our list, Min Min. I don't like the green costume, because combined with the yellow and orange, it looks bad. My favorite is her cyan costume, because it looks amazing with the color combinations. Well, those are the worst and best costumes of every Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Fighter. Let me know what you guys think of my picks in the comments below, or join my Discord server to discuss it. Anyways, that's all for today's video. If you want to see more Nintendo content, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.